So back in 2019, this strange story was everywhere, right? The president of the United States wanted to buy Greenland, a massive island of ice. But here's the thing. The story that everyone was talking about, that wasn't the real story. Not by a long shot. I mean, on the surface, it sounded kind of crazy, right? A total whim. But the question why goes so much deeper than you'd think. Why this giant island of ice? And why now? What you heard on the news, well, that was just the tip of the iceberg. See, this was never really about a simple real estate deal. This is a story about, well, it's about quiet takeovers, secret corporate moves, and a geopolitical game that's been playing out in the shadows for over a century. So let's get into it. And to really understand how this whole thing came back into the spotlight, we're not going to start in Washington, D.C. No, our story actually starts somewhere you'd never expect. In the world of high-end art, with one of the most iconic paintings of the last 100 years. It sounds like a riddle, right? What in the world could connect a priceless Austrian masterpiece to the world's largest island? The link feels impossible, but trust me, it is very, very real, and it all comes down to one incredibly powerful man. And this is him, Ron Lauder. You might know the name. He's the heir to the Estee Lauder fortune. He's a huge art collector, famous for helping get the Woman in Gold painting back to its rightful owners. But here's the twist. Around 2017, he's also the guy who strolls into the White House and resurrects this old, almost forgotten idea of buying Greenland and puts it right in front of Donald Trump. So while the news was going crazy, talking about a potential military invasion, maybe even the end of NATO, everyone completely missed what was actually happening. The real play wasn't about warships, it was this silent, almost invisible economic takeover that was already in motion. And that's the key right there. While all of us were watching the spectacle, the political theater, the real moves were being made in the quiet of a boardroom. They weren't using armies, they were using the tools of high finance. Let me show you how it worked. The weapon of choice for this kind of operation, it's something called a Delaware corporation. Now, just think of it like a Swiss bank account, but for a whole company. It provides this incredible cloak of secrecy. It's the perfect way to run a sensitive project completely under the radar. And that's precisely the move Lauder made. He sets up the Greenland Investment Group, and through this secret-ish company, he starts making these really smart buys. We're not talking about random investments here. These were calculated moves. He went after critical infrastructure, like a major hydropower project, and he poured money into something called the Greenland Water Bank, a company that had been desperate for an investor for years. So what did all this money buy him? Well, it wasn't just assets. It bought him access. The kind of access you can't put a price tag on. Suddenly, his business partners weren't just anybody. We're talking a former government minister and, get this, the husband of Greenland's own foreign minister. That's a direct line from a close friend of the U.S. president straight into the heart of the Greenlandic government. But here's the thing, Lauder and Trump didn't just cook this idea up out of nowhere. What they were doing was tapping into this really old, really persistent American ambition. The dream of controlling Greenland, it's been a part of U.S. strategy for a very, very long time. You have to go all the way back to 1867, right after the Civil War. The same guy who bought Alaska for the U.S., Secretary of State Seward, he was the first to propose buying Greenland. Then fast forward to World War II, the U.S. builds military bases there. And then in 1946, that's when things got really serious. And just to give you a sense of how big a deal this 1946 offer was, check this out. President Truman put $100 million in gold on the table. In today's money, we're talking way over $100 billion. That's more than 10 times what the U.S. paid for Alaska. And on top of that, he threw in a slice of the oil rights in Alaska. This was not a casual offer. This was a massive strategic move. So what's the deal? Why this obsession that's lasted for over a century? Well, it's because in the 21st century, Greenland is no longer just some remote, frozen landmass. It's become one of the most valuable pieces of real estate on the entire planet. And that interest today is all about the new great power competition. You've got Russia, who sees Greenland as sitting on the shortest missile path to America. It's also the gatekeeper for their subs to get into the Atlantic. Then you've got China, eyeing it for their Polar Silk Road shipping route, and as a place to get their hands on valuable natural resources. And the list of reasons just goes on. It's where the US has its critical early warning radar systems. As the Arctic ice melts, whoever controls Greenland controls the new shipping lanes. Underneath all that ice, there are vast amounts of rare earth minerals, the stuff you need for all our modern tech. And at the end of the day, it's geographically part of North America. So for the US, the idea of a rival like Russia or China setting up camp there is, well, it's a non-starter. Okay, but there's one more layer to this whole thing. The Greenland Gambit wasn't just about acquiring territory. It was also a message, a deliberate poke in the eye to America's own allies. You could even call it a stress test for the entire NATO alliance. And Trump himself laid it out pretty bluntly. This was pure, real politique, foreign policy based on cold, hard power, not feelings or ideals. The message couldn't be clearer. We are not letting our rivals become our neighbors in Greenland. We'll do whatever we have to do to make sure that doesn't happen. So this set up a really interesting scenario, right? You have the leader of NATO, the president of the United States, making a move on the territory of another founding NATO member, Denmark. So the question is, how do the other big players in Europe, France, Germany, the UK, respond? How do they show solidarity with their ally? The answer came down to one number: 30. That's right, 30. That's the total number of soldiers that 6 major NATO allies combined sent to show they had Denmark's back. Just 30 soldiers, not even a full platoon. And for someone like Trump, this was the whole point of the exercise. In his eyes, it proved his point, that the alliance was a paper tiger, that it couldn't even defend its own members. And that just reinforced his belief that the old system was broken. But, in all this talk about great powers, the US, China, Russia, NATO, it's so easy to forget who's actually at the center of all this. The people who live there, the Greenlanders, and their very, very complicated history with Denmark. See, Denmark's relationship with Greenland is difficult, to say the least. We're talking about a 300-year colonial history with some truly dark chapters, treating the native Inuit people like second-class citizens, and a horrifying history that even includes the forced sterilization of Inuit women. And yet, even with all that baggage, Denmark is still hesitant to grant Greenland full independence, even while they admit they couldn't possibly defend the island from a major power. And that brings us right to the final, most important question of all. In this huge global game of chess, who should get to decide what happens next? Should it be Copenhagen, the old colonial power that can't protect it? Should it be Washington, the superpower that wants to own it? Or should it be the 57,000 people who actually call Greenland home and whose voices have been lost